I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is TRILLOQUY, true and real conversations challenging the status quo of classical music. Still working on that.
You've hit season 2. Welcome.
Yeah, Opus 51. Thanks so much for being here. Still kind of working on that that tagline. We're getting close.
Well, at least people will know that we're trying to come up with something that really encompasses everything that we're doing. So
yeah. So along with this Opus 51, if you go over to TRILLOQUY.org, you can watch a conversation between myself, Scott, and Vanessa Rose, president and CEO of the American Composers Forum. Obviously we get into the protests and the police brutality that everyone is talking about right now, as we will a bit in this opus, but in that overture to season 2 of TRILLOQUY, you'll be able to check out the new format we have going that you'll also get a taste of here. So be sure to go over to TRILLOQUY.org and check out the overture to season 2. All right, Scott. So how about we jump right in? Checking our accidentals this week's events. I think we both had very sharp reactions to what's going on. If we may name one of those accidentals, shall I or shall you?
Go ahead, man.
All right. The thing I had the sharpest reaction to was how widespread this has become. I began my conversations surrounding what was going on here in the Twin Cities by, talking about this as a community issue. It hit a little closer to home for me because it felt like, as I've said so many times at this point, a community deciding that there's something that happened within that community that they were not going to tolerate. That's kind of where I saw it. But last night, Dell and I on the couch and just flipping through all the cable news channels and going through the local ones and seeing different city after different city after different city, with fires and looting and also the peaceful protests. I should name that as well. But who can remember a time when the protests were this widespread across the entire country? I mean, nearly every major city.
The last time it happened, Rodney King. I think I was 21 or 22.
Yeah.
When that happened. And, I walked the length of campus with it wasn't really a protest. It was a march.
Yeah.
What impact does that have? I don't know. But I do have to say that seeing 72nd and Dodge Street blocked off in Omaha, Nebraska, that is a major artery, north, south, east, and west.
Yeah.
And to see that shut down and to hear that just a few blocks away from where I used to live in the old market, a man who owned a bar there shot a protester, killed him. From what I'm reading here online, no charges are going to be filed. Evidently, he was acting in self-defense. This happened right above my beloved Dubliner pub, where I used to just spend so many happy times.
Yeah.
And man, to see this happening in Omaha, that's what makes it real for me. And to see that happening there. It's scary and heartening at the same time.
Well, we were watching a couple clips from the news in Omaha, and that black woman came on the screen to say, we're all in this together. We're one Omaha. And I was kind of wondering, from your perspective, especially, considering how we're all really applying race to this conversation, racial tension, is that your perception of your hometown, one Omaha?
Maybe they were that night.
Sure, but in general, it's very black and white, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, very much like Minneapolis. The North Side is a predominantly black neighborhood, and it has its success stories, and it also has so many of unsuccessful stories too, the tragic stories. But there was lots of business resurgence in North Omaha that was happening. I haven't seen any stories about if it's been impacted or not. I should do a little bit more research, but
yeah.
Yeah, so the north end of Omaha is where predominantly black people live.
Now, of course, in the time slots that we sit in on our day jobs, our night jobs, we have the consideration of being in the thick of it when it's time. You're leaving work right after midnight. I'm getting to work, 10ish or so, and that's a consideration that has me jostled a bit. I know you for sure.
Yeah, last Thursday night, I'm not going to say I was approached, but there was at 2 stoplights on the way home. See, they closed the interstate, so I had to take the surface streets home. And there were 2 places where, let's just call it a menacing presence of young men, masked, and just sort of, trying to get a look at me about, what's in the car. I now that I think about it, I can't even say if I felt unsafe. It was just uneasy, man.
Yeah.
I'm there by myself. Nobody's at my house, waiting, and I have to take that into consideration. I have to think about the neighborhoods that have activity that are not calling 911.
Right.
And there are, I hate the word bad actors, but there are bad actors who are capitalizing on this situation on the east side.
But it's important to note, I think, that in light of all of the violence and the, sort of destruction that's happening, to hear Governor Walz repeatedly say in one of those briefings, I just hope everyone will do the right thing. Please do the right thing. Mm-hmm. And those of us who are versed, instantly thinking to Spike Lee,
Radio Raheem.
What do you think the conversation is there? Because
in Omaha,
or in general, when it comes to the actual destruction, I mean, the peaceful protests are one thing, mm-hmm. but some people are, quote unquote, doing the right thing.
Yeah. Like I said, this is as much information as I have, and what we watch downstairs is what I've seen.
Well, I guess I mean more in general about like the actual destruction that's going on. It's easy to say no. We only need the peaceful protest, but do you think there are folks that are justified in some of the destruction that's happening?
100%. And as much as I hate to watch it and can't really stomach it, even though I'm drawn to it, how can we be surprised? How can we at all be surprised? And I hate that I hear people saying, well, this isn't the time to be talking about ways to be able to, we need to get this under control, and then we'll address your great. Well, how many times was that said and it doesn't happen? So, and to the people who say, well, why are they burning down their own neighborhood? You damn sure weren't listening before.
Right.
So now that it's on your doorstep, here we are.
And I don't like that burning down their own neighborhood sort of rhetoric, because first and foremost, the protests started right there at the intersection of the third precinct, the late third precinct. I mean, how do we describe it? It's gone now. It's burned up, and the former. So people were gathering there peacefully, of course, at first. In that area. So I don't like that whole narrative of, the self-destructive black people. I can't get down with that. And I'll agree with you. I mean, I don't necessarily condone violence, but I understand everything we're seeing as the manifestation of racism, right, as it's been said over and over and again by so many people, reaping the seeds of hate, for forever. Every bit of our society, if not, if it didn't have an arm on racism, it was rooted in racism and the respectability and the practices that go with that. So
something has to happen, and something beyond, getting the correct convictions for all 4 of those men.
Yeah.
I talked to my brother. He's in Abu Dhabi, and he sent me an email, and he was asking about the fires. I said, man, if these guys walk, or if they get something light, you'll see.
I'm getting out of town.
You will see the fire from Abu Dhabi.
I'm getting out of town. Yeah. Oh my goodness! Because again, as widespread as this has been, the Rodney King riots, I think, I remember talks of skirmishes and other places, but most of us, if we remember it, we're thinking about L.A. This thing, everybody in every city in the country is going to have a story to tell about there being stuff going down in their city.
Yeah.
But again, I mean, it's time, and as you said, this is on everybody's front door, so we all have a role to play in it. I guess if we're gonna, loop this around to classical music, what can you say is our role in it as classical music professionals? How have you been addressing this with people through your work on the radio?
I've been doing a couple different techniques. You remember that episode of The Office when they were worried about being downsized? And
oh, sure.
So they went and got the dinner.
Oh, the dinner party game.
Dinner party game.
Yeah.
I think that in some ways that's kind of been my role. I'm like, hey, look over here.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And trying to keep people entertained, but you can only do that for so long. And for me, the probably one of the realest moments that I've ever had on the air happened when I had Our Town, and to me, that music is the soundtrack to an idyllic snapshot of, any town USA, Norman Rockwell, whatever cliche you want to assign to it. But now I'm left with what's going to happen to our town. And I tried to loop it around that, this is universal. This is everybody's town. It could be your scrapbook, your photo album. It's perfect for everything. And then to play it was just so damn sad.
I want to get more, and I have a couple of questions to ask you about that as we get into movement too. But I guess to round out movement one here, you talk about how you've seen your role as a sort of look over here. Of course, I don't have that privilege. How could I, the black person on the air, not directly address it? And not that I do so out of some not a negative obligation, but a positive obligation. I feel like I'm uniquely positioned to do that. So, I have to.
Right,
and of course, there's a pushback. You know how a lot of listeners are. But I've also gotten, tons and tons, way more positive feedback. I think people, I feel like it's refreshing for people to hear, folks in classical music actually addressing something that's happening in the world.
Yeah,
and how can we not address this? And of course there are pieces of music that tie in with it, but oh goodness. Well, to everyone, wherever you're listening from, I hope you're safe. Please hang on. I mean, what else? Because we haven't even talked about coronavirus. And that's kind of just taking the back seat.
What a relief to not think about that.
So goodness gracious, hang on. If you're going to demonstrate, protest, which I personally condone and support, make sure you're doing it with your mask on. I mean, that's all that you can do at this point, right?
Yeah, let's not even get into that.
All right. Anyway, all right. Well, let's move on. Okay, it is time for us to strike a chord. So, Scott, in Movement 1, you brought up, how Aaron Copland's Our Town sort of struck a chord with you, thinking about what's going to happen, to our town. Mm-hmm. The conversation I want to open up concerning that is thinking about who Copeland was, thinking about the towns he's talking about as they relate to race relations, even back then now.
Is this where I get dragged?
I'm not trying to drag you, but I'm interested in kind of exploring this. Aaron Copland's Our Town, this idyllic white paradise that could be disrupted by protest and riot. I mean, there's a bit of that could be explored too, right?
Yep.
Because
that's a blind spot for me. I didn't see that.
Well, this is not an admonition, but
no, I'm thinking
in our old neighborhood where we lived, where me and Dell lived. We would walk late at night with radar, and you would talk about how you hear Our Town, because it was kind of just that neighborhood, that very cozy, very tidy. But as we've seen on the news, the protests and some of the destruction has reached that neighborhood, has reached the so-called Our Town. I mean, so, what do you think about, the idea of letting classical listeners know, especially the classical listeners know that, this involves you too. You're not safe. This might be something that you have to be involved in on more than just a philosophical level.
Yeah, that, and it makes me feel like I left a gap in that break when I was on the air with it. See, and this is another part of this job, man, because if you don't think about the way that this might come off poorly,
yeah,
I didn't get any negative emails about that, so that.
Could you imagine me getting on the mic and being like, all right, look, we finna listen to Our Town, Aaron Copeland. You ain't safe. So enjoy it while it lasts, bitch. Or maybe I don't say that, but enjoy it while it lasts.
I thought you didn't like that word.
No, I don't.
You told me you started to have that's one of my favorites.
Well, thinking about people in this idyllic sort of, again, like I said, white paradise kind of irritates me thinking about it these days. More so thinking about the person that is like from a safe distance. Now let's think about the officer who was on George Floyd's neck. I'm not even going to name him, but he lives out. Like he doesn't live in Minneapolis. He lives, out in a community.
He's not far from me.
Right. But he's even further east though. Yeah. And his house was guarded by the police, and the idea again of this safety being shielded from a certain perspective because you're from our town. If we want to run with that analogy.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're? We talked about Omaha a little bit. How you talked about how shocking it was to see that intersection closed. Did you? I guess you thought about Omaha as our town in that regard.
In that regard too, and plus, there's just sort of an attitude of. They'll do it. The other people protesting will do it. It's just it's not one of those kind of places.
But then you could even go further with that. The attitude of they'll do it. I feel like is the attitude a lot of white people have had up to this day. They'll do it. Oh, racism. Oh, they'll. Yep. I'm not racist. I'm good. So they'll deal with it. But here we are. It's on more and more people's doorstep. And goodness gracious, I'm hoping tonight will be calmer.
Is it hot? Is it hot on this side? Have you seen anything that is giving you pause?
It's some stuff going down over here semi regularly. A gunshot here and there doesn't scare me all that much. Of course I'm worried, but it does happen. Sometimes it's just a firework, who knows? But there is a little bit of there is a little bit of noise over here if that's what you're asking. But
we're in the season of is that gunshots or is that a bottle rocket or what?
Already June. 2020 is going by. 2020 is kicking our ass. Goodness.
Yeah, it can go as soon as it wants. No, what were we talking about? Talking about our town and the.
It ain't safe. It ain't safe. It ain't safe.
But on the east side, my neighborhood, I always felt like it was on the verge of the upswing. And man, this has knocked it back. There's sirens and gunshots all the time.
Well, what I've been saying is that again. I like this conversation of Aaron Copeland's Our Town because that does not exist anymore. There is
no Our Town. I think
in the United States the idea of the so-called safe neighborhood is done because we're not safe. I'm not. The white neighborhoods are where I feel unsafe because that's where somebody's going to call the police on me.
Yeah.
So that ain't that racism that vitriol that exists or that always existed silently. Has manifested. You can see it now, So that's why I'm not messed up about a lot of this. I don't know. It's hard to say I'm okay with destruction and looting. That's not what you want to say. But I'm also not one of these people saying, "Oh, well, Dr. Martin Luther King was all about peace," because he talked about protest and riot being the voice of the unheard. And I understand why this is. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I am centering the racism as the violence. Racism destroyed those buildings. Racism looted those stores. That's what we need to work on fixing. Our town, it's done. It's done, Aaron Copeland.
I want to give a shout out to Unicorn Riot If you stream Unicorn Riot either through YouTube or through their Twitter presence, they are in the protest, in the riots with the rioters, interviewing people. And something's going down. They're finding caches of gas cans, logs soaked in firewood. Unicorn Riot took people inside the 3rd Precinct after it was breached and before the internal fires were set. If you want to see what's really going on, not the stuff that your local, I'm sure that your local newscasters are doing a great job.
Yeah.
But they can only get so close, right? And so this guy is just in here streaming from, I'm guessing, a phone. But if you want the unvarnished truth, if you want to see the real deal going on, tune into Unicorn Riot.
Well, what has struck a chord with me this past week, I've really dived back into some of those spirituals, and they come up, the Negro spirituals come up on my playlist at work every now and again. But when you've mentioned Aaron Copeland and Our Town and all that, Aaron Copeland didn't want women to write music. He felt like, it was, he had that very old school idea that women just did not write music.
Really?
So right now, off the top of my head, I'm thinking about Margaret Bonds, the black woman composer who, worked so many of those spirituals into piano music. And, the folks that sit back in their rocking chair and are comforted by that, Chopin nocturne or something. For me, it's that spiritual, I talked about, before we started recording, I was talking about the spiritual Sooner Will Be Done, and telling my audience that, one way or another, we're going to get through this, and this spiritual from all the way back in the days of slavery was a reminder of that sooner will be done one way or another. Unfortunately for the slaves, they were talking about death. They were talking about sooner will be done. I'm going to live with God, Is that the way we should be thinking about the spiritual as well? Sooner will be done. I guess we have yet to see. I mean, what if it turns into, like, I don't know, what's one I'm thinking about, maybe one of the Batmans where it was just complete martial law in New York. What if we get down to that?
It's possible.
Goodness gracious, will we have jobs?
Don't know.
What if we get all the way down to the nitty gritty? What store are you looting? You're not gonna say. He's scared. It's fine.
I don't know.
Because some of the music stores that we kind of cherish, we will, like, you would want to protect that guitar store that you love so much.
Oh, Willie's, yeah, I would. No, I would take Radar and just bug out. I don't know what I would take with me.
Well, I think I would have my bassoon in hand and these microphones, because I bought them.
But it's just, it's just weighing you down. That's if you got to move.
Yeah.
Less attachments are better, I guess.
Speaking of those spirituals, so the guest who is going to take a stand on this 51st opus of TRILLOQUY is Adrian Dunn. So he lives down in Chicago. He is classically trained. He has an album called Redemption, in which he sort of reimagines many of these spirituals. It's got a piece of music that everyone's been talking about, The Seven Last Words of the Unarmed. Shout out to Joel Thompson. Adrian Dunn was involved with the first SATB version of that, not just male choir, but men and women.
That means soprano, alto, tenor, bass. Okay.
Yeah, sorry for you laymen. For folks not members of the SATB community. And Adrian is also coming up with what he's calling the Black Music Experience, which is a Black-owned music streaming service. So folks, don't have to worry about diversity and inclusion on this stream or this station. This is going to be dedicated to Black music of all kinds, classical and otherwise. So
wow.
That's something that he's coming up with. So how about we take a quick breather, and then we'll get into my conversation with Adrian Dunn. Adrian, I really appreciate your speaking with me today. I come to you with a very heavy heart as I'm, sure you're going through so many emotions, but thanks so much for speaking with me.
Of course, I'm really glad to be here.
Of course, we're going to talk about Mr. George Floyd and the situation surrounding that. But for folks who don't know you, how about you introduce yourself to some of your new listeners here?
Sure, my name is Adrian Dunn, and I am the founder of Hopper World. I'm also the founder of a new streaming platform called Black Music Experience, which I'm super excited about. And I'm also most happy to be the founder of the Adrian Dunn Singers and the Rise Black Music and Justice Symposium here in Chicago. Um,
Yeah, and it's so, it's something how, we have this tragedy on our hands, and of course the piece of music that everyone is connecting to this tragedy, the Seven Last Words by Joel Thompson, your involvement with an arrangement of that piece. But before we get into all of that, I'm wondering what some of your initial reactions were when you heard the news. I'm here in the Twin Cities, so in a way, I feel like we've kind of been a day ahead of each other, being on the
mhm.
scene when it happened and, just seeing how reactions are going along here. But what's your general reaction as someone not so far away in Chicago?
Yeah, so my latest album's called Redemption, and this is just a way around to getting back to answer your question. But Redemption is a project that I composed of spirituals dedicated to Black men murdered by police, and there is the spiritual I arranged called "I Open My Mouth to the Lord" was dedicated to Eric Garner, whose last words were, of course, "I can't breathe." And I opened my mouth to the Lord was this perfect spiritual in my mind to articulate how Black folks, even since slavery, have been opening their mouths and using literally their voices um, to fight for our lives. And when I saw the video, that was the first thing that came to mind. His words, "I can't breathe," right? And for me, it was soul shattering in the way that it was soul shattering to see that with Eric Gardner all those years before now, right? Because they were his exact words verbatim,
Right,
right? They were
right.
literally his exact words. And as we have been touring with the Black Music Matters tour this year and last year, doing these arrangements and really repurposing and reframing how music is a living will and testament, if you will, for Black folks around the struggle that we have endured in this country for so long. So not only is my heart and my soul shattered in this moment for Mr. Floyd and his family, but I am at a place right now where my work, and I have dedicated my life's work as a composer to justice and the dismantling of white supremacy in classical music and in the music industry overall. And what role does music have in not just preserving the historical context of things like the spiritual, but these are people who lived these experiences. These words came from slaves. These words came from Black folks who lived this thing. And we're still here now in the same situation, in the exact same place, uh, in 2.0, 3.0, 5.0, whatever version. We had slavery, we had post Reconstruction, we had
Right,
Jim Crow, we
right,
had Rodney
right,
King, we have Black Lives Matter. You feel what I'm saying?
right.
Whatever iteration we're in right now, the result is still the same. I'm tired and I'm sick of it, and I'm really sick of the larger music industry not being able to understand or grasp the weight of the moment we're in right now.
It was a moment for me, understanding what was happening, as far as the protests not too far from where I live. It was something for me to, instead of going to support that effort, um, to go to work and, of course, advocating for, his family and his life and justice on the platform I have. But, for me, it still begged the question, am I doing what I can? What do you think about the idea of music for social justice? Is it really an applicable front on this battle, so to speak?
Well, if it wasn't, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Uh, but in the regard that I think what my work and my role and my idea of what justice is raising the awareness to the public in the industry and the music industry overall that we have an issue in our space. We have not an issue around, just LGBT issues and all these other things. We fundamentally have a race issue in the music industry overall. We, particularly in classical music, I believe have a black folks issue.
You've used that
And
you've used that phrase twice now, classical music, and you talk about dismantling white supremacy in classical music. How do you define that? What is classical music?
so for me, classical music as an industry complex is the music of not just dead white composers, but I believe that the classical music industry now in our modern day context really refers to even the compositions that we're doing by living composers, right?
Right.
And I think that the reality is that when we talk about classical music, there is just a general association with white men, with white folks. Um, Regardless of the style of composition, right? Because for all of us who are classical musicians and classically trained, we know that classical music is, a period
Right.
in the larger in the larger continuum of Western art music. In America, I believe that our understanding of what classical music honestly has been people who are trained in the conservatory model, who have come up and have called their compositions opera or genres of classical music, right? And we have just adopted that as being classical music in 2020.
I mean, because
Um,
earlier you're talking about, the Negro spirituals you're writing and that tradition. What is more classic to our experience? What's more classical for us than those songs, than that style of music?
Yeah, I argue all the time that justice for Black musicians and Black artists look like the fact that there isn't anything more classical. I had a conductor say to me, "Well, America's classical music is jazz." I said, "Well, in my opinion, America's classical music is the spiritual." And not just because we've had folks who have said that who were Western European ethnomusicologists and who've talked about the history here, but because this is the foundational piece of American music, comes through the slave field, right? Um, and I believe that that is just as much classical as what we call George Gershwin's Porgy and Bess,
Right,
right?
right.
And in my opinion, it's more American. And that's another topic, but just making the point about this connection of justice and of Black folks in this country and the inequity around Black bodies in America and the role that classical music and the role that all music has to do with it, I think is a connection that most people are not making. We feel like um, we have nothing to do with it, and my work in terms of not just reclaiming the narrative that Black folks are the authors of American music and culture through the spiritual, but my role is to say to the world that this music not just has power, but it has power to change
Mhm.
the way that we fundamentally see Black folks in America and our
Absolutely.
discourse around race and our discourse around equity and our discourse around fighting for the rights of those who we are the descendants of slaves who built this country. this is not deserving of a group of folks who have built this country, America, on the backs of Black folks. And right now, I'm tired and I'm disappointed and I'm hurt, but I'm also invigorated and I'm also motivated now more than ever to continue to fight for Black lives because that's something I will never stop fighting for because my life matters as well.
I want to shift to the piece of music I mentioned earlier, Seven Last Words of the Unarmed by Joel Thompson. The first time I heard that piece of music, I'm sure the first time you heard it, it was, the orchestra and male chorus, but you shifted it into a piece of music for orchestra and SATB chorus. How did that collaboration come about?
So we were approached by the Chicago Sinfonietta, and they needed a group to premiere the SATB arrangement Joel had done. And I was like, great, awesome, we can do it. And as we approached it, or as I prepared the piece, there were a number of moments where I asked for or didn't ask for permission. I just kind of did it. But when Joel got there, I was betting that he would like it.
Hmm.
Some of the changes that we had made. And I thought what was powerful about this performance was unlike the U of M performance or unlike the Tallahassee performance, there were women in this performance,
Right.
right?
Right.
There were grandmothers in this performance. There were aunts, there were mothers in this performance. And that to me, not just that this was an all black ensemble, but that this was an ensemble who was delivering this message in the first person, if you will.
Right.
These were people who have lived this, and that translates to the audience in a very different way. Um, it was just such a powerful night, and it was a powerful performance, um, and I was just happy to be a part.
It's again, it's interesting how this tragedy with George Floyd is hitting different with me. For the first time, actually being in the same city as the tragedy and the protests that follow. But of course, on the internet, people from their outside perspectives like to trivialize things and ask those typical problematic questions. But one of the critiques that I've seen is that in America, when it comes to Black Lives Matter, we actually only care about Black cis het lives. And I wonder if that's something you've thought about, especially, considering that you incorporated women into this really powerful piece of music about police brutality.
Can you repeat that last part just one more time? You said we only care about what lives?
Yeah, one of the critiques that I've seen on the internet is that when we say Black Lives Matter, we only care about Black cis het lives, cis male heterosexual lives. The critique is when women face this sort of violence, when trans women face this sort of violence, especially. We don't have the same energy for it. And I wonder if that was a conversation or something that you've kind of thought about, considering the fact that, you took that piece of music and decided to incorporate women.
Yeah, well, I will say that that Joelle had written the SATB arrangement,
Okay.
and I think we were the group who was there to prepare it and deliver it for the first time. I think my perspectives around women and the role that Black women have in the movement and have around this was to reflect that um, this these issues, right, affect so many folks. And I think not only do Black women and Black trans lives matter, but that is, I think, to a certain degree, that assessment is probably has quite a bit of truth to it. I also think that the role that that Black lives or the Black Lives Matter movement, I don't believe um, perpetuates that necessarily.
Sure, sure.
I think that that's more of a societal and media, right? Because the media has a lot to do with what we see and who we believe takes precedent, um, is our perception, right, of what the media gives us. And so I would agree, for sure. And I also think that not just Black trans lives, but Black women, in general, never get the same level of exposure, around Black missing children. I even talk about the HBO documentary on on the Black missing children of Atlanta and how
Hmm.
that was just beyond mind blowing to me because I had never heard of that before. Um, and one of the things was, in my experience of going to Atlanta since I was a child, Atlanta presents itself as a city of like Black success, Black Hollywood, Black upward mobility, all of these things. But the history of Atlanta, that was really, um, told in that documentary again were of young Black boys, um, primarily, and girls, I believe, also, who were murdered, years ago, and never those murders were never really solved, right? They were all just pinned on one person, and so I think there is also a large historical, um, uh, history
Hmm.
of not documenting and not properly, exposing, the full depth of what's happening when it comes to murdering Black men and women.
Right, and the again, the expanding of Joel Thompson's piece and the way that, you write your spirituals, I think really tells that story. As you mentioned earlier, it's not just singers that we hear, but it's grandmothers, it's daughters, it's sons, it's fathers, cousins, aunties, all of that.
Right. And the other thing is that, the human voice is a magnificent instrument.
The most important one.
And right. And I believe that, um the way that women can wail a high C or a high A is just something that God can't do. And your perception of the work, in my opinion, automatically changes, when you hear the SATB arrangement. And again, and that's not a comparative analysis, but or that one is better than the other. You know what I mean? But what I'm saying is I think, it's different. It's just an altogether different experience. And so, yeah,
For the target audience for so many institutions, classical and otherwise, is the youth, is that middle school teenager age to try to get them in and path them toward a career in music. Do you think the style of music that you write and the message behind it can actually translate to a youngster? It seems like it's so hard to pass anything along, and many of us begin to think in the way we think and have these conversations into our adulthood. But do you think there's a way to break into this youth that we always work so hard to engage through things like the reimagined spirituals and music connected to Black activism?
absolutely. And again, if I didn't, I wouldn't do what I do.
Yeah.
I believe that, one of the things that we, were working on pre-coronavirus, of course, that's been delayed, obviously, is a mixtape version of the Redemption album, that's specifically targeted at younger folks. And that the reality is that, in Bell's, for example, I renamed the spiritual originally called Rock in Jerusalem, and I now call it Bells. My arrangement is called Bells. Something as simple as that, people say, "Oh, not a big deal." But for a younger generation of folks, it's significant. Titles matter, even down to, what the arrangements do. A lot of the concert spiritual culture, to this point, has been around, um, a Western performance idea, right? Where you sing and you're quiet and then you clap and then all
Right,
of those
right.
things. My
You wear a
arrangements
certain thing.
Correct. And my arrangements, I don't like that. I don't want that. I don't want you to sit here because the reality is that when you sing these songs well, you have no other choice but to move, cry, whatever, right? And I think with Bells, I put it as a contemporary rallying cry for the life of Tamir Rice, right?
Right.
I said that the reality is that the murder of a child is a murder of a child, period. Any day, anywhere in the world. And that is something worth being angry about, is something worth fighting for, is something worth continuing to talk about until it stops, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that this music can reach younger groups of folks. It just has to be made in such a way or delivered in such a way that it meets people where they are. We're not trying to get people to come to where we are. I believe that we should be trying to get the music to meet people where they are. Um, yes, which is really what BME is about. But
And
yeah.
I was actually gonna transition us into BME because, the kids aren't, popping in a CD anymore, certainly not a tape or whatever came before that. I wonder if you could, I wonder if you could talk a little bit, about BME. I mean, first of all, is another streaming platform really sustainable?
So I believe the short answer is yes. I believe that BME is something that the world needs. I think that entrepreneurs create things when there is a gap, right? When there's a hole, when there is a need. And I believe that in the United States, not only have we had a need for a platform that features not just the popular music of Black America, but that features all of the music and art of Black America in one place. And I believe that that's what the Black music experience is designed to do. Is not just to create Black art through concerts and performances, etc., but it's also designed to hear this art from the perspective of the Black art creators and content creators from that perspective. One of the other cool things about this platform is that there's also an educational component to this platform, kind of like a masterclass, if you will,
Sure, yeah.
where you're learning from the Black artist creators, from their own words, from their own perspectives, from who we are without the parameters of, say, white institutions, which
Right.
many of us operate inside of. That's the way that we work. It's the way that we make money. And I believe that what we have really never really heard from is this generation's unadulterated truth as to what our art is, why it exists, and why it should be in the world without that other influence, if you will.
Right.
Um, we need that. We don't need again. It's like a censored media, right? We need spaces where we have free artistic reign to create work that is about us from the genesis of the work to the end,
And I think
not monitored and censored.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
and I think a point that really needs to be underscored in what you said is identifying and reaching out and representing all of Black America, all of Black music America. So, that can very well include the symphonies of William Grant Still, Florence Price, but also what folks are doing today, including, I suspect something that you're doing as well called opera. Now, the first time I thought about the idea of hip opera is when they put Beyonce on TV to do,
Mhm.
Carmen, if you
Mhm.
remember that.
I do.
Are those is that along the lines of the work you do on the opera side of things, just making opera a little more updated and applicable to Black folk?
No, actually, I personally feel that um, the current opera game, like, I think sometimes when people hear opera, they think it's just like the hip hop version of Don Giovanni.
Sure.
And it's like, no,
Which I
absolutely
might catch on
not.
YouTube.
Yeah, you might, and I think there have been numerous attempts, and again, this is in no way a knock to what any creators have done in the past, but opera for me is a true artwork that embodies the Black experience from A to Z. And for me, it's largely in part my experience um, as a black man in America, told through the modalities of opera and hip hop. Of course, because hip hop is a fusion form, of course,
Hmm.
there's going to be influences of blues, jazz, gospel, all types of vocalism because that is Black America, right? There has to be vocal representation from every side of the musical spectrum of Black Americans, and so opera is really just my imagination about telling Black stories. I liken it to say my work, I feel like, is similar to what Spike Lee's work was in the film industry in the late 80s, which was to, in some ways, throw the rule book out the window as
Right.
to how we tell the stories and really telling those stories on Black folks' terms. We saw the beginning of the 90s and late 80s, we started to see things like Boys in the Hood. We started to see
Do the right
the work of
thing, you
John
know?
Singleton, absolutely, Do the Right Thing, and School Days, and talking about colorism and talking about
Exactly.
things that had nothing to do with white America. For so long, we've seen opera as a genre that is in service to and in its genesis a Western European form. And what I see with opera is that this is truly um, about Black folks through and through, expressed through the modalities of American music and culture on our own terms, which I would argue in the larger classical space is not something we've seen very often.
Are there stories
Um,
floating around your, mind right now or on your writing desk for opera?
yeah, so I'm working on a new piece called Black Bohème, and it is a wonderful piece, I believe,
Oh, I'm sure it
about
is.
four friends who are artists who are millennials, coming of age and trying to figure it out in a city like Chicago, and trying to figure out how to monetize their art, how to make money and live and pay rent and do their thing, but also really kind of talking about and embracing a lot of the things that we as Black folks oftentimes don't get to talk about,
Right,
which is, how hard these things are when you combine them with religion, when you combine them with Black culture and family and all of these things. And what is the intersection of sexual orientation and identity and all of these pieces that oftentimes are absolutely present in Black culture, but never rise to the surface in a lot of our, particularly in the opera space. In the theater space, we've been talking about a lot of these things for a long time in Black theater, but in opera, not so much, not so much. And so I think that is one of the new pieces that we're working on that will actually premiere on BME later this fall.
so it's a piece, about folks trying to make their way, as you said, monetizing their art. So what I hear is you monetizing your art and at the same time teaching other people how to monetize their art, paying it forward and getting it back and everything else. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think we as my philosophy about Black art in America is that, much like we have always seen, even with Spike Lee, even in other artistic spaces, is that Black folks have had to largely for a long time in the beginning support our own art making, right, with our own funds, with our own for family and friends, and all of those things, not having a lot of institutional support via funding. And so I think that part of paying it forward is creating new economic models for artists, Black artists, and artists of color. I think we have to. We have to because our current systems are inadequate. If we haven't seen that by now, I don't know how long we're going to keep doing the same thing, expecting new outcomes. It's time. It's been time. It's been time. And I believe that this is one of the strong pieces as to how we create alternative arts economies in the United States, specifically geared towards Black folks and folks of color to succeed and redefine what success looks like.
Well, then, in the spirit of supporting our own economic structures, how can folks support the Black music experience and the opera that you write?
So I'm glad you asked. Our goal is to late summer, so end of July, and the top of August is our potential launch, our official launch, excuse me, the hard launch of the platform. You can download the app onto your phone and also onto your Apple TV or Roku TV. And by the end of the summer, and you can subscribe. And so, even in the interim, very soon we'll have a landing page up where folks can sign up and get email updates about all of the current programming that we're going to be debuting on the platform, and then also making sure that folks subscribe is really a big piece for us.
And what about the Redemption album? Is that available for folks to check out now?
Yes, the Redemption album is available on Spotify, Apple Music, and it is a powerful journey. It's a journey. It's 17 tracks, but I'm telling you, it's a great work that is a fully orchestrated piece of choral arrangements and compositions by me, with my professional all black ensemble here in Chicago, the Adrian Dunn Singers, and they are spectacular. So proud of them, and I'm so proud of the work that we have been able to do through Redemption. And so you can get a copy of it online at Spotify, actually Apple Music, all online retailers, as well as my new book, which is also called Redemption: How Music Saved My Life and Can Save Black Lives.
When it comes to, life's journey and the work that needs to be done, I love the analogy of climbing the mountain. And sometimes the further up the mountain I climb personally, the steeper it feels. But also the further
Yes.
up I climb, the more folks I see climbing the same mountain. So I'm really glad that our paths could connect, and I really appreciate the work you're doing. Thanks so much for talking with me.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I really, 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 really appreciate it. And thank you for reaching out. And thank you for giving me and our group and these ideas a platform. And like I said, if anyone wants to continue to check out the work that we're doing here in Chicago, you can definitely find it all at adriandunn.com.
Oh, Mary, oh, Martha, oh, Mary, ring them bells. Oh, Mary, oh, Martha, oh, Mary, ring them bells. Bells.
Okay, and we're back with movement four, the Triloquy. All right, so you want me to give, you want me to go, or you want me, or you want to go first? Let me grab my phone because I have a few things. How about you go ahead? And I'm just going to go ahead and let the listeners know. I asked Scott for this Triloquy, for his true and real. To address the white people. So go.
It's on your doorstep. Whether you think that you had a hand in it right now or not, this goes back deeper than you know, and it is on you to research, to read, to try to
But I'm not
transform
racist.
yourself.
But I'm not racist. I have a black friend.
That's great. That doesn't mean that you don't have some biases and tendencies that are to you just ingrained in the way that you were brought up. I'm seeing them now in myself. I see a lot of them.
How dare you? How dare you call me racist? You don't. Do you understand what you're saying? How dare you call me a racist? I'm not racist.
How are you not racist?
Because I told you I have a black friend.
Mm-hmm. What does your black friend think of you?
Well, I never asked him what he thinks of me. All of my white friends know how I think of them.
Okay, no. So what I'm saying is that like in the Twin Cities, we've talked in season 1 about how there is more at stake in these protests due to the way the Rondo neighborhood was torn apart. And the interstate and that neighborhood was directly affected by that. So we're talking, this is generational.
Generations. Yeah.
But you have to acknowledge it. You have to at least put the effort in to understand what it is actually like to not have all these comforts and all these advantages that you've had, which are now being shown plainly because it's in your yard. Now all of a sudden,
I went to, I was a part of a panel at one point, and I just kind of, actually with Vanessa Rose, the racial equity thing back in September, and Mr. Lang, who was there kind of facilitating a lot of it, he made a point that I had never thought about. He talked about racializing white people. So we talk about black music and what black folks and all that stuff do all the time. But I feel like as a society, saying the phrase white person has always been a little bit uncomfortable, but here we are. We're saying that a lot now, aren't we? And I'm a shout out to the allies, because I know that there are allies out there, but I think by and large, every white person needs to take a look inside and ask themselves a certain number of questions, and they need to look around themselves and ask those people questions. And that's where I get fired up. Mm-hmm. It's the lack of accountability for the folks who you have contact with, who have these problematic feelings and statements and all that.
So when I see things blowing up in a place like Omaha, which, to be clear, there have been protests, but I do not recall in my time there riots or violence to this degree. And if you do and you want to send them to us, then shoot it through our website. There's I'm sure a link that we can, if you've got any information that you want to share. But white people, it is happening. And it's on your front door.
Period. All right. Well, I'm not going to take too much time here. I don't want to turn.
Not too much time. You've got a list.
I don't want to turn the last movement of each opus into just a reading session.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
But with that being said,
but let's set precedent with the first opus of this second season.
So last night, on my social media anyway, it started getting around that the principal trombone of the Austin Symphony Orchestra was on Facebook wilding. Mm-hmm. All right, so you know me. I did a little research, and I found the comment that folks are talking about. And it's a comment. It looks like a comment she made on someone else's post. But her name is Brenda Sancic Salas. And she said, Trump isn't rioting. The blacks are. He'd be damned if he didn't shut down the country. Stop your hatred. Okay, so they read her. They got her together. And I'm not even going to go through all of that. So anyway, there was such an outcry just from the comments alone. So someone managed to Google her name or something and found out that she was principal trombone of the Austin Symphony. So they started screenshotting that against the comments just so people saw. Okay. Yeah. So, yesterday was Sunday. As we're recording this, yesterday was Sunday. So, and we're in the coronavirus anyway. So the orchestras are closed. The offices are closed. Don't you know, by the time I got to the website, that's what it looked like. Her name was gone. Her name was deleted. Okay. Wow. So, of course, I go and follow them on Twitter and see what's going on. And I'm going to read what the Austin Symphony said real quick. Okay, it says, message from ASO Executive Director Anthony Carora, quote, we would like to thank the community and let you know that your voice was heard. As previously stated, we were made aware of offensive posts that were shared on social media by one of our musicians late last night. Once alerted, we were appalled by the comments as they are clearly not reflective of who we are as an organization. We began to work quickly and closely with the American Federation of Musicians, our orchestra committee staff, and other key members. At this time, we can state that the musician is no longer employed by the ASO, for there is no place for hate within our organization. Thank you for your patience while we navigate through the necessary channels, end quote. Now, let me take you through some of that. It's important to note that they said they quickly got in contact with the American Federation of Musicians and the orchestra committee. Okay, so when you're in the orchestra world, you can't just get fired. That is something that does not happen, especially when you have tenure and you have to go through the all steps. The process. From under normal circumstances, I got the job and I got tenure, but I don't want you in that position to you're getting fired. In many cases, is a 2 to 3 year process, even if it's completely justifiable. The Austin Symphony Orchestra said no. They immediately reached out, and especially in this climate, we're seeing the institutions that are going to put up with it and the institutions that are not going to put up with it.
Yeah, man.
The Austin Symphony Orchestra was not one of them. Now, we can speak to whether or not they would have done that if this was quieted down, if this is a response to widespread critique as opposed to one of their musicians being racist. You know, we can have that conversation. But at the end of the day, they did what they needed to do to expedite the process and to get her out of here. We need that. It's the baseball sound. She's out of here.
Boy, I tell you, with and with the way how quickly social media moves, man,
The internet is fast.
She's gonna have a hard time getting a job playing a rusty trombone.
That's why I try to keep myself together, because I know they're gonna dig up some of my old tweets. Let me shut my stuff down now. All right. I think that's it. I mean, all in all, it is up to every single person to call out these inequities where you see them if we're going to change the world. And it's this is not going to be polite. We're done being nice. We've seen that with the fires and the violence across the country. We are done.
You're going to get called out. You're going to make mistakes and you're going to get called out, and that's part of it.
We didn't even talk about what's her name, Cooper from New York, you know. Remember, what's her name, Amy Cooper? Or I don't even know her name, the woman in Central Park who got on the phone screaming and hollering.
Yeah, that's for another
At the
day.
bird watcher, who was pretty good looking, man. Might I say, shout out to you.
So, and look at that. She lost her dog, who was damn near strangled, and her job, and... yeah, what's his name's wife's getting a divorce. So this is going to cost.
This is going to cost. Some of you are going to pay. Maybe some of you listening.